Hi, Jacky.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be interviewed.
You're most welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be able to speak to you in person, having read so many of your books.
Thank you very much.
So, just to begin with, my first question is for anyone who's new to your work. If you could give them a brief snapshot of yourself in terms of who you are and what you do, would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very, very important to talk about the positive aspects of paranormal experiences. And although I absolutely believe that all the sort of the ghost shows and so on definitely have a place on TV, they've certainly got a lot of people interested in the paranormal. I think it's very important that we understand the positive side of paranormal experience. And what I tend to work with is mainly people's either their angel experiences, so experiences where they feel that an angelic being has intervened in their life some way and brought about a positive outcome, or even saved their life. Or I also work with people's real-life experiences of spontaneous contact from the other side of life, so their loved ones who have visited in dreams and visions and are giving them messages or confirm that they've safely arrived in heaven and so on. And that is the work that I concentrate on most. So I would call myself a paranormal experiences expert, and that's what I specialise in my books.
Oh, that's great. And with your books, people send you the most interesting stories about angels and spirits. And I was wondering if you have a favourite story, or is there an example of an angel or a spirit working in a way that surprised you for its ingenuity?
Oh, gosh. I mean, there are so many. It's difficult to sort of
pick one.
difficult to pick one.
Yeah.
I think some of my favourites are those where something really dramatic has happened. An absolute favourite is there was a lady during the war years. I'd been looking for the railway station. It was during the blackout, so all the street lighting was off. And she was wandering around the dark trying to find the railway station, suddenly spotted some white gates, walked through the gates and found herself actually on the train track and could hear the rumbling of the train coming and suddenly thought, this is it, I've had it. And was not able to, sort of frozen the fear, was not able to get off of the line quickly. But then suddenly found herself being lifted by a pair of what she described, a pair of giant hands up into the air and up onto the platform. And she said there was nobody about, and absolutely it wouldn't be very easy to lift a grown woman off off the tracks anyway, but she said there was no one around, she didn't find anybody. Now, I love stories like that because I think where you get something of that type, which is so dramatic.
Yes. And I hadn't actually read that sort of intervention before I read your books.
Yeah.
And there was another guy on a mountain who he wasn't meant to fall off, and then all of a sudden he was falling, but he found himself back
on the top.
Yeah.
That also is another fantastic. You get these driving along in the car the one day and suddenly found themselves sort of flying over the top of the road below to avoid them crashing into lorries and so on. And there are lots of dramatic stories involving vehicles, particularly cars and so on. So it's not all about subtle intervention. I mean, there are many stories where people say, you know, I felt my grandma touch my arm. And that's fabulous.
Yes.
But, you know, if you're somebody who sort of needs a little bit more proof, there are plenty of really dramatic stories out there as well.
Yeah. And can I ask you also, please, to just mention how you first became interested in angels and the spirit realm, and if you had a particular experience that was acting as a catalyst?
Yeah, there were several, if I'm honest. I mean, there was one particular one where I was watching a TV programme. It was actually this morning, GMTV this morning, and it was with Richard and Judy, so we're going back a bit now. And it was actually the angel author, Diana Cooper, who was on the show talking about her own angel experience. And something sort of happened to me when I watched the show. First of all, I thought, what a fantastic job. I'd love to do something like that, and I'd love to go on the show. And ironically, many years later, I actually did. I've been on a couple of times. So that was strange. And another thing was I had a bit of a flashback to an experience that I'd had as a child. And I remembered being on a beach holiday with my family, and I was going down to the sea to pick up water in my bucket to put in the motor around my sandcastle, as you do when you're 5. And it was a very hot day, and I decided to have a bit of a paddle in the water, but found myself floating up and down with my swimming ring, found myself being pulled out to sea. And didn't panic initially because I thought, well, no problem, I can still touch the bottom. But then I couldn't, and I seemed to be unable to get back. And I had this immediate fear that I would drown, that I could die. This could be my last day on Earth.
Gosh.
And just as I had this panicky feeling, I suddenly felt very calm and peaceful. And, I mean, it would be fantastic to say I saw an angel. I didn't, but I did feel a very strong presence. And I was given a choice with that presence. I was actually told, within my head, I mean, I don't remember an external voice, but I remember being told, you can drown if you want to. And it was a choice. I was given a choice. You can die at this moment if that's what you want to do. And, of course, I didn't, thank you very much. So I could drown if I wanted to, or I could be helped back to shore, and that's what I chose. I chose to go back to shore. And I would love to say that, again, it would be a good story if I could say that I suddenly found myself flying through the air in the arms of angels or something. It wasn't as dramatic as that. But I did very quickly find myself back on the shore. And as I got out of the water, I remember thinking, something just happened there. Something unusual happened. And at 5, I wasn't able to sort of really think through what that might be. But I knew something dramatic had happened. And I remember running up the beach and saying, Mummy, Mummy, I nearly drowned. And she just sort of said, yes, but you're fine, dear, have a sandwich. And it was like the moment had gone. And I'd forgotten this experience for many, many years until I'd watched that television programme one day. And it kind of thrust the whole memory back into my mind. And I think that was one of the more dramatic things that at that time made me think, there's something going on here. And I decided to investigate more, and I just sort of fell upon the writing, really.
Yes. Right, okay. Then it seems like your path was really set for you, doesn't it?
Yes. I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's not something that's done. I mean, certainly at school I didn't sort of think one day I'd be doing this type of work, but from that moment I felt excited enough that I thought, I want to write a book about this. I wanted to write about normal people, ordinary, everyday people who'd had these types of one-off experience. Because up to that point, I considered it was the sort of thing that happened to very spiritual people.
Yes. And
I was just a mum with a couple of children. And I thought, there's got to be other people out there like me who are, normal is a strange word to use, but it's just kind of, people who weren't interested in this type of phenomena, who nevertheless still had these one-off bizarre experiences. And I wanted to be able to take that and put it into a book form for other people like myself to be able to read.
Okay, and that sort of leads on to the next question, which is, why do you think some people can clearly see and communicate with spirits and others can't?
Well, I think the same way that some people are going to be brilliant at playing the piano and others aren't, that it's a skill that, if we take the piano as a good example, actually, there are going to be some people who find the ability to play the piano something that comes easily to them. But most of us can have lessons and learn to play of a fashion if we chose to do so. And I think it's the same as any other skill. I mean, I don't really see them, but I have heard them. And certainly when I've asked for assistance, dramatic, coincidental experiences have happened to me to sort of lead me to believe that they're around. So I think it's the same as any ability. I think most of us have psychic ability in one form or another. But as we're all individuals, each of those skills vary between us as individuals.
And I suppose it just depends how busy our lives are. And
absolutely. I think certainly in this part of the world, I mean, we're so busy all the time. We have 101 lists in our mind. You sit down and close your eyes, even if you try and relax or go to sleep, that always there's, I need to pop out and pick up sugar, or mustn't forget that, the children need picking up early tonight from school, and there's so much going on.
Yes.
I think people who do meditate and who do spend time to relax more are maybe more likely to have experiences, but nevertheless, people who consider themselves to be not psychic at all still have these one-off experiences throughout their lives.
Lovely. Okay, and this is quite a personal question, really, because I've heard that loved ones on the other side are very much at peace and they're full of love. But also I've been told in a reading myself that they can still display characteristics they had when they were alive, such as if they're a bit mischievous or a bit manipulative.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could just clear up your own understanding of how spirits are once they've passed over.
Well, I think initially what tends to happen is they very much retain their earthly personality when they first pass.
Right.
I mean, they don't suddenly turn into angelic beings of all-knowing, full of wisdom. It doesn't happen quite like that. And I think because each of us are on a unique journey, each of us respond differently once we pass into the light. So some of us may be newer souls, and so in which case those earthly personalities we hold on to for longer when we pass, and more advanced souls will become more angelic, if you like, for want of a better word. But I think certainly initially, when they are able to communicate with us, they bring that personality forward with them. They do have more knowledge when they pass. They have a wider perspective. Often people will come through with a message and with things like, I'm sorry. So maybe they are suddenly aware more fully of things that they've done in life. They're a particularly grumpy or moody person, for example. They're more aware of how that person has been hurt as part of their life review. In that whole experience when people die and they say, or have near-death experience, and they say, my whole life passed before my eyes. And I believe that people do have these experiences, and hundreds of stories in books about near-death experience will prove that. When people come back afterwards and they have seen their life, they know how they've touched and hurt people and how they've helped people.
Yeah.
So I think, that explains it the best, really, is to say that they do have a bigger understanding, but they don't suddenly become angelic and, perfect, pure souls at the point of death.
Oh, okay, right. And then you mentioned at the beginning as well that you like to obviously stay with the positive, but have you ever had any frightening experiences with spirit?
Mischievous, let's say. I don't really encounter a lot of negative things in my work, even with everything that I do. I mean, I do remember once I'd been working with two psychic mediums during the day, and we've been doing an awful lot of communication with the other side. And I think we must have been throwing a lot of light up, because I remember that night just drifting off to sleep and suddenly feeling as if a spirit was trying to enter my body from the back. Now, it sounds bizarre. I've never had anything like that happen before. I didn't know what it was, but I just felt uncomfortable for a moment. I remember sitting up in bed and swearing very loudly, and whatever it was disappeared very quickly. So whether that was me having a bad dream, I don't know. Another funny experience I had one day when I first started communicating with relatives. Several relatives were trying to make contact with an uncle on the other side. I'd been to see a psychic who told us that this uncle had been trying to communicate with us. And we were sitting in the room talking about him when suddenly a light bulb blew. We all let out a scream, and then we did burst out laughing. And he regularly comes and flickers light bulbs. That's his calling card. If you mention his name, the doorbell will ring and there's nobody there, or the smoke alarm will give a single bleep. So he's clearly very adept at messing around with it. So that's funny rather than scary. But no, normally it's. I think if you tend to work in the positive, if you tend to work with the light, then like attracts like. That's what you're attracting into your existence.
Yes, yeah. And do you have any favourite books yourself, or authors that you like, or films on spiritual matters?
Loads. I mean, everything. I have piles and piles of books. I mean, I order hundreds of books from the internet and spend far too much money on reading books. But I absolutely love the work by Dr. Michael Newton, who's written, two of the books that I've enjoyed the most have been Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. And another author, Dolores Cannon, who works in a very similar way, really everything she's written, Dolores Cannon and Dr. Michael Newton, and both of them are similar in that they use deep hypnotic trance techniques with patients, where they are retrieving what Dolores Cannon calls lost knowledge.
Right.
So she'll put somebody into a deep hypnotic trance state and then ask them questions, and they'll talk about past lives, they'll talk about what happens to them when they die. They'll also retrieve existences on other worlds that the soul has had. It's the most fascinating work that I've ever read, and I'm sure your listeners would be very interested in following that up. So it's Dr. Michael Newton and Dolores Cannon.
Thanks very much for that. Nearing the end, but I just want to know quickly if you have any thoughts of bringing out your own oracle cards, like some of the other angel workers.
Yes, I have looked at it. I mean, I actually collect them. I've probably got about 50, 60 different packs of oracle cards.
Library, yeah.
I'm absolutely fascinated with them. And I have toyed with the idea. I think I have to be sure that I've got something that competes favourably with or is very different to what's out there at the moment. Rather than go out and produce something that's already be done. You know, I need to do something different. So watch this space.
Yes, thank you. And ultimately, what do you have left that you'd like to achieve in this lifetime? Do you have any unfulfilled ambitions?
Well, I feel very excited, and I've done so many things. I love my work. I mean, I'm just about to finish my 8th book. I've got a couple more books in the pipeline. So I guess I would say to continue to write books and have them successfully received, which is very exciting as an author. But I'm hoping to do more television work. I really think that there's space for a TV programme to take the positive aspects of the paranormal out to the public.
Yes, or even a channel devoted
Absolutely,
to these subjects.
yeah. And I'll be...
That's great. And I think you've answered the last question, which was if you're working on anything at the moment that you'd like to share with us. I know you mentioned briefly that your dad's just passed as well.
Yeah, and yet it hasn't, the experience, although obviously I'm very sad that I've just lost my dad, the experience hasn't been the way that I expected that it might, because immediately after he'd passed, he also began communicating with the whole family. I myself had several dream visitations. Each of his daughters had visits from their dad, and he's rung doorbells. And again, no one's been there. Funeral director was at the house, and we were talking about my dad. The doorbell rang, we went to the door, and there was no one there.
Yeah.
Again, the lights were flickering, alarms were going off. He's done it all. He's done everything. So that's a whole future book. I have to write his story because it's so positive. And it's a lesson for everybody, I think, that he wants to show that life continues. And it's hard to be sad when you know that life still exists somewhere, somehow.
I know. Isn't that wonderful as well? He might be co-authoring with you.
Oh, I absolutely... Do you know, we discussed it before he passed. I said to him, you know, Dad, when you go, you'll come back with me and help me write a book, won't you? And he's doing so. How fabulous
lovely.
is that?
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm glad that it's had a positive outcome as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And thank you so much for taking the time
Most
to talk
welcome.
to us. It's lovely. Lovely to speak to you.
And you too.
Thanks, Jacky.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.